Well, hi everyone, welcome to today's blog on this first Monday of Lent. I don't know how you're getting on with these days of walking with Walter Brueggemann and his work about thinking of a different way other than our own. Apologies for the scratching of the windows outside. It's a little bit windy out there and the tree is scratching against the glass, so I hope it doesn't distract too much, but there's not really anywhere else I can do this. Yeah, I read today's blog, which Walter's written, and reflect on it, and I'm blown away really. He goes to one of the deep mysteries of our Christian faith, where he draws upon the writings of St. Paul, as St. Paul himself reflects upon the cross. So just go with me for a moment. So you've got Walter Brueggemann reflecting upon St. Paul reflecting upon the cross, and we're reflecting together on all of that. But this is what St. Paul had to say. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, things that are not, to reduce to nothing things that are, and so that no one may boast in the presence of God. It seems a whole load of contradictions, and maybe we don't fully understand this reading. I'm not sure I fully do. But there's something that echoes within me that sort of talks about something both different and yet strangely also very true. What Walter Brueggemann, I could read the whole passage that he read, and that could be my blog for today. But what he's talking about is the way Paul recognised, Paul was a man who'd had so much intelligence. He'd been trained at the very highest levels, if you like, to become the chief rabbi or whatever. He'd read a lot of books on most libraries of his day. And then he reaches for something else, which has to do not just with the person of Jesus, but indeed with the way Jesus lived out his life, and indeed the cross. And for many people, the cross is both a challenge and a conundrum all at the same time. It's a challenge because it points us to another way of life. It's a conundrum because it seems to be talking about something which certainly in Paul's day and indeed in Jesus's day was apparent failure. And yet it has been the symbol that has been almost haunting the world ever since. And I use the word haunting not in a weird way, but as if it's echoing of some other tune, some other song that inspires, and for those that can see it, they will reach out for. Paul talks about this in another way a little bit earlier in the letter called 1 Corinthians. If you ever get a chance to read it, even if you only ever read chapter 1, from which these verses come, then that would be helpful. So what's he trying to say? Well, Walter Brueggemann puts it like this. He says, Paul lyrically talks about God choosing what is foolish to say to the wise that little acts of compassion will they violate your learning. Walter Brueggemann uses very powerful images in his language, his choice of language. God chose what is low and despised in the world to reduce to nothing the things of people who think they're everything. Folks, he says, the odds are always long, but may you entertain this. The world waits for newness. For settled wisdom knows nothing of newness. Settled wealth knows nothing of newness. Settled power knows nothing of newness. And so he goes on. And when we think about all that's going on in Ukraine and everywhere else today, those words seem to just be like a gong going off in my mind and in my heart. Because yes, the way of the world seems to speak purely of power and who's going to shout loudest and demand most. And yet, strangely, the cross goes in exactly the opposite way. And so if that's where the cross goes, It looks for the small things, it looks for the little things, and they, strangely, in God's heart, undermine all the powerful. It's almost like saying prayer, especially prayer from someone who seeks to love and to show grace or compassion or forgiveness across a divide, will undermine those holding the gun or the bomb. It seems not to make sense, and yet we long that it might be so. And so I'd like you to consider, and this is what Walter Brueggemann goes on to talk about, thinking about what makes God happy, and to reflect on your day today. I reflect on mine, and to seek out what makes God happy. I've had a day full of church politics and trying to sort things out with many people. And yet also, and it's not a small thing, it's actually a huge thing, that I took a funeral this morning of a young lady who sadly, whose life was cut very short by a brain tumour. And the love that was at the crematorium, at the chapel there for this lady, and not just the love for her, but the love of the things that she stood for, which was about bringing people together, about celebrating the good things in life, as in friendship and believing in people and wanting the best for people, and in reaching for that which was beyond in order to make that possible for people. The love was absolutely palpable. How does that stand up in the face of all that we see on our television screens? And yet, many drops make an ocean. And so really in this blog, I'd like to dedicate to a young lady called Helen, who is that lady, and to all the other Helens and all the other people who seek to do good in defiance of that which is so powerful and painful. To all those who seek to show love when everything within you says don't. Just look after number one. For all those who seek to be generous and kind in an age which can be, well, really quite withdrawn and sometimes just thinking about the self. So one of Helen's songs, most favourite songs, was China in Your Hand by T'Pau. She sort of embodies that really. If you've never listened to it or you haven't heard it for years, as I hadn't until today, I would encourage you to think about having listened to it maybe on YouTube or Spotify or whatever. Reaching for dreams, holding out for hope in the face of difficult things. What would make God smile in your day today? What would help you to smile with him and to see the little things, which are the touches of his grace? Thank you, Walter. Thank you, St. Paul. Most of all, thank you, Jesus, because your cross and your love are just as valid today as they've ever been. And may they continue to be, even in these difficult times. God bless everyone. Have a good rest of the day. Bye for now.